Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the Human Library podcast, episode 1. Okay, before we start, I would like to actually thank you both for starting this. It's going to be an amazing roller coaster trip. So
Yes, sir.
excited. Yeah, excited. So as you heard, this is episode 1. This is our first try. And for the topic that we decided to go with is self-sabotage. I believe the three of us have it like close in our hearts. We actually believe everyone in a certain way has experienced this. So we decided to go with it, especially because of the podcast that we are actually doing right now. So I think we want to start with a little bit of our self-experience of how this important topic like was in a certain aspect like in our way before we started this project. So I think I would like Mehdi to start with this, and we'll move forward from there, guys.
Yeah, sure. So I think we all have like a kind of backstory about self-sabotage, but it's going to be more relevant to talk about our self-sabotage regarding the podcast, because this is the first episode, right? So I had this idea of starting the podcast since 2017. If you guys know Mehdi, he's like a famous YouTuber. He's a content creator, and he has this ground up show. And I used to watch this podcast, and it was insane for me. Like the visuals were amazing. He's a video maker, so the lighting was good. I'm sure the lighting is not good today, but we want to emphasize on the shadow, so we're just keeping it like this. But I wanted to start, and I was self-sabotaging myself, basically. I said that I cannot start it without, having 3 cameras. One wide angle, the other one is zoom in on the guest, the other one is zoom in on me. And I need to have like good visuals, I need to have soft boxes, I need to have like everything really well set to start. And that was basically just an excuse. Because I got this equipment, I think, 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, I was ready to start, but I was always like blaming something. Well, I'm not in a good mood now, or I need more knowledge, I need to read more books. But then just recently when I started having this idea, I felt finally like that I was sabotaging myself. And also because I read about self-sabotage. So I was like, okay, what's the worst thing that can happen? Like literally nothing. I can start a project. If it fails, it's fine. But it's something that I want to do. So then I thought I was also questioning, should I do it in Arabic? Because that's my native language. And I was self-sabotaging myself when it comes to English. I was like, okay, I'm not going to be delivering well because it's not my native language. So I discussed this with Aslan in the beginning. And I asked him, okay, would you be down to do the podcast? Because we normally just have cafe conversations about the same topics that we're having in the podcast. So he was down in the beginning. And then I believe that he started self-sabotaging himself. So he said, dude, I'm not feeling it. Like, I don't know. Maybe he's going to expand on that afterwards. Yeah. But this happened, and then I reached out to you. And I was like, dude, like I enjoy having conversations with you. Would you be down? You said yeah. And then he showed up again, and he said that he was basically making excuses, which again, he's going to expand on that. And then we agreed to start the podcast. So that's also a good backstory for the listeners to know about this podcast and how we started having this idea. Because basically we just enjoy having conversations with ourselves, and that's something we would like to share with the audience as well. So gonna leave it to you.
It's like a very kind of an interesting convoluted story, like the way that this thing started. But I mean, I like it. It's like also for the first episode, it's really, I think, like kind of cool that actually it intersects a lot with self-sabotage, because like in my case it was I don't know. I think with self-sabotage, I was not, obviously, I just realized it today, actually, because we were thinking, okay, like, how do we start this so that people can easily relate to this? And I was thinking, like, Oh, but I actually have a story as well because I was self-sabotaging myself as well because I was thinking like initially I was actually like, okay, let's do it. I'm in. I like the idea. But then I was also I got kind of hesitant and the thing about self-sabotage is like, I think everyone's familiar with this, is like the thoughts that feed self-sabotage are like, they can be anything. It could be like completely unrelated things to the actual problem that you're having, right? This self-sabotaging behavior. So you never really know the root of it. It's more like, I was thinking like, okay, like, will it be worth it or will it be good? Like, how are we gonna do it? Like the logistics of it. Like you start thinking about, and I guess it was similar for you, right? Like you start thinking about all these little details instead of just like doing it. It's kind of
like, I don't like my haircut today. I'm not gonna do it.
yeah. Like it's like very I think it's rooted in like some kind of this, well, depends on the people, but like more or less I think everyone has this like this perfectionist attitude or fear of like uncertainty. You're just like, because when you open yourself up to like a project like this, or really any project, there's always like uncertainty, and if you're dealing with another person or anything, then there comes this moment where you're like I cannot control this, like everything here, or like it could go either way, and then those thoughts come in that you start like justifying to yourself why you shouldn't do it, which I think kind of is like how self-sabotage functions basically.
And we're gonna go back to this. We're gonna go back to this afterwards. But we want to also hear Adriano's backstory about self-sabotage.
For sure. I just wanted to add a little bit on that as well. Also, I think we're always waiting for the right time, but there is no right time. There is no right time. Exactly. In my case, I think it was a little bit different because when actually Mehdi reached out, like I said, like, let me think about it, because I was like, man, you already have like 2 jobs. You're doing like a bunch of like other things, like, I don't know, exercise, go to the gym, read, meditate, like trying to pile your life together on your free time. Like, I have a girlfriend, for you understand what that means sometimes, but like, so
good example.
Yeah, but that was the same thing. I was just like making excuses. I'm just like, hey, it's because this will saturate your time. This is going to be like so energy draining. This is going to be like too much for you, man. And it was like, dude, it's like a very cool project. And the same thing came out of my mind. Actually, I was thinking about this yesterday when I was in the toilet. I was like, like, Jesus, tomorrow is the first day. And I got a little bit nervous. I was like, what if I fuck up? What if I like, I didn't do my research properly? Or what if this is too much? Like, what's going to happen from here? And then it was like, I told this to Annie, and then she was like, dude, just chill. Like, you like this. I'm pretty sure that the 3 of you are like in the same level of this, like, like with sweaty palms and kind of shit, but like, you're going to make it work. And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah. The simple, like, fuck it, let's do it.
Yeah.
And I guess the 3 of us are here now. So this is cool.
I think also self-sabotage was a perfect topic to start with, because during the whole week I was doing research about self-sabotage, and I was self-sabotaging myself about the podcast as well. So I was thinking about it and then reminding myself whenever I do the research.
Yeah.
So it was a good, I don't know, it was an interesting experience to be dealing with yourself. Like, okay, you're trying to educate the audience about a specific topic that you're dealing with as well. So it's like, we're not self-experts. We're still trying to overcome this self-sabotage because it's ingrained in us, basically.
Yeah. I think this is actually a very like good like step forward for us, for the 3 of us, because it's something that we're like very passionate about, like the entire project of itself. But of course, one of the first like steps that we need to take is to like, it's like in ourselves to get not the confidence to understand why we're just like pushing it back, So this topic is very, like very, very awesome. So I think it's time to start talking a little bit about it. I'm gonna pass this amazing mic to Aslan. I'm not gonna even do an intro. He's gonna just do his thing, guys.
Yeah.
Well, so yeah, we can start with the definition of self-sabotage, because it's it's like an interesting thing where it's like it's very hard to define it as well. I think we've been kind of hinting at it. I mean, a lot of people probably already on an instinctual level probably have a good understanding of what we mean. I mean, like this saboteur personality, like what is sabotage, right? Like I mean, like traditionally you think of the definition of it, it's like someone who would basically hinder another person's success, right? Like, or like another, like whatever it may be, right? It could be a company, or it's like you're a saboteur, right? You stop things from going the way they're supposed to go. That's kind of the definition of it. And I think like historically actually it comes from people who would I think it was during the Industrial Revolution where they would sabots, like I think it's like a shoe that actually they would throw into the machine to clog, like stop it from functioning. So that's kind of like the sabotage where it comes from, like with the shoe.
Well, if they didn't work, they wouldn't get paid either.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
It was like self-hurting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So like this, and then obviously, like the self-sabotage is like you doing it to yourself, obviously. So it's basically like thinking of it like the basic way is like any kind of behavior that would hinder your success or prevent you from reaching your goals, whatever they may be. That's kind of
but the tricky concept about it is that, okay, like it sounds easy that you say someone is stopping themselves, but the problem is they're not aware that they're stopping themselves.
That was the question I was going to say. Is like, are they actually conscious of this type of behavior they have, or is like, I don't know, something within themselves?
Yeah, and this is where we get into the whole like the subconscious, or as Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, would refer to it, like unconscious, which is a semantic thing, but subconscious, unconscious behaviors and patterns that we all have. And obviously, like it would be useful to define people who don't know what we mean by unconscious. It's people go through life like since you're born, since your childhood, and there's always too much in the world for you to actually consciously notice and to consciously process. And it's only natural that there are things that go on like unnoticed, right? And obviously, I think people by default assume that those things just disappear, but they don't. It's impossible, right? Like your brain receives info and it has to be stored somewhere, it has to go somewhere, right? And it goes into unconscious, right? Even things that you forget, things that, and then obviously, like there are different categories of things that people have that goes into the subconscious. It's like things that you forget, as simple as that, or suppressed thoughts, right? Things you don't want to think about. They go into the unconscious. So the like a big part of self-sabotage obviously is like not knowing that you're doing it. But how could it be, right? Like that you're not knowing that you're doing it? Well, because you have certain dynamics in your unconscious that are manifesting themselves. And I mean, in Jungian, looking at it through the Jungian way, I mean, the big part of it is also looking at like your childhood. Also, this is kind of generally psychoanalytic way of looking at it as well, where, the big part of it is like the complex issue, like the paternal complexes that people have. So, you're going through your childhood and you have, let's say, a parent who's a bit distant, or a parent who is a bit too critical of you. And then what children do is it's kind of like internalization of certain things. So as a child, you let's say you have this distance between your parent and you, because a child just wants love, and a child just wants to connect with the parent. But when there's this distance, the child basically has this ideal image of the parent in their head, and then there's the reality of it, right? So they have to work up to fill that gap somehow, right? So, and this is where this thinking already comes, where the child, obviously the parent is also too powerful. Like as a child, your parent is like, your brain unconsciously understands that your parent they cannot do bad things to you. Like, this is your parent. You're too dependent on your parent. So the parent can't be a problem, right? That's the thing. You are the problem.
Yeah, that's
right.
I think that's the most
the
important
beginning-
point. Like for kids, for example, or like as a child, you don't think about this figure that you mirrored to learn how to walk or like how to behave, that they're gonna be the wrong figure.
Yeah.
And you're not rational enough to understand their motives behind behaving in a certain way. So you just not even assume, you believe that you're not worthy of the love that you're not getting from them.
You're not good enough. So
Yeah.
obviously, like these thoughts that you have as a child, then, that I'm not good enough, so I have to do this to be a good girl, to be a good boy. And then you grow up, and then these internalized thoughts, they continue. Basically, if you don't notice them, obviously, you're going to have these same patterns repeating in your life, where people would be, I don't know, changing jobs often. It can manifest in so many ways where you're just constantly looking for ways. It's like this pattern of like trying again and again and again. You know, it's like expecting a different outcome almost. So that's how it manifests itself unconsciously. Also, like a huge thing is like the self-deprecation thing, where people you know, it's like very benign, but like people can put themselves down in super easy, like simple ways, like, oh, you know, like, oh, that's just me, I'm clumsy, or like,
I'm a Gemini, I can't help it.
Oh my God, I'm a Libra. Apologies.
yeah, I like that's what I do, you know. But like, it's very simple, but it's almost like this kind of it's partly rooted in this
it's a belief that
self-loathing,
it's-
self-hatred kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like,
Because it also grows with you, right?
Yeah.
Like when you grow with life, everything that you're just putting behind it grows with you at the same time, but you are not noticing it. It's just like there in the corner. And this is very like what you were saying with the patterns. Like if you don't realize the patterns that you're doing, that you're living, that every day like becomes a habit, becomes this type of like behavior, it becomes you. And if you don't realize it, you will never know the root from where it's coming from. You're gonna be like, why am I like this? You know, like always like I know what I have to do, but I never do it. You know, it's like kind of like, for example, I'm gonna involve, of course, substances in this. Let's just say like an alcoholic. You know, someone that's like, I need to be sober. It's like, okay, well, you know what to do? Yes. And then gets wasted 10 minutes afterwards. And you're like, but man, why? It's like, I don't know. There's something in there. You know, the self-saboteur.
I
is
think
in there.
it's worth mentioning that resistance is really important in that subject of self-sabotage, because one of the first stages is actually to be aware that you're self-sabotaging yourself. But also it's not the easiest stage, but what comes afterwards is super difficult as well, because it's like you're giving up a part of you, which is super difficult. You become resistant to letting go. Like sometimes you might discover that this person like betrayed you, or like, I don't know, did something bad to you, but you're so resistant to letting go that you go through this negotiation phase of like, okay, maybe it was me, maybe it was not. Even though like you're super rational about stuff, but just the fact that you should let go, or you have to give up on something, it's super difficult for all of us, because we have a lot of rooted or ingrained traits in us.
yeah, and a huge part of this also is with drinking. You said, I thought about like there's this thing called like discharging behavior, where if you have this dynamic happening, self-loathing dynamic, you're basically like, all of this is constantly happening in your daily life, like the like, let's say overthinking, or like this unconscious dynamic. So it's like almost like energy that's getting built up inside of you, right, of self-hatred, self-loathing, like all these doubts, and then different people manifest it differently. The discharge behavior. So I know people with like, you know, some people who do, and it could be like simple thing that you mess up, you fuck up. Like it could be like, you get like a driving ticket or something, right? Like, and then you come home and like beat yourself, like slap yourself, like fuck, like what is wrong with me, like it's like, and also it's like for people who have culturally as well, like for women, for example, there are, let's say, unrealistic expectations for women in society, right? Like, let's say to live up to a certain standard. Beauty standards. Yeah. And they can be internalized as well, where it becomes self-loathing, like I'm not like living up to the standard.
Yeah.
And a lot of them can have certain discharge behaviors, and the common one is like promiscuous, like being over promiscuous. It's almost like you're looking for ways to validate that you're good enough, right? Like, so it could be so many different, and drinking also is a part of this, where it's a way to, well, obviously it's like a way to shut down the voices, like the numbing down.
Exactly.
That's exactly.
Yeah, I want to mention something about the repression of traits initially, because all of these things that you mentioned, like we go through some stuff in life and we have to throw many things to the void and not deal with them, but then they manifest as shadow aspects. And basically, just to explain what is the shadow in the Jungian philosophy, it's oftenly like understood as your negative side, but it's not actually your negative side. It's a dark, let's say, a container in which you put all your childhood traumas or all the bad events that you had in life, or basically the unpleasant traits that were not accepted by your parents or not accepted by society, or also from your own experience, stuff that maybe they're good, and well, we cannot define what's good or wrong now. Maybe we're gonna leave this to another topic. But basically, from your experience, if you do something, as I said, even though it's good, but you suffered in the way, like, I don't know, you're just being funny, but you're punished because you're being funny, then it's gonna be an unpleasant trait, right? And most of these traits, they, or let me just quote Carl Jung here. He says, it frequently happens that unconscious motives overrule our conscious decisions, especially in matters of vital importance. So you can see someone as really calm person, super reserved, and you're like, oh shit, this guy is unshakable. But then in a certain critical moment in which like you see him a bit stressed or something, he can react in a bad way, be a bit aggressive. And some people can just like, oh, we never know that this guy is like this. But no, actually he was repressing a lot of unpleasant traits, and then it manifests themselves in these decisions. Like they're not super conscious that they're reacting this way, but also it's one of the first steps to understand that you have some shadow aspects that you need to work on. Is through this pain of like, I don't know, it sounds bad, but maybe we've all done mistakes. Sometimes like you can hurt people, or sometimes you can hurt yourself without knowing. But once you start going through the pain and you do a kind of self-assessment to yourself, you understand that, okay, this happened because of this. Like, I was aggressive because I took this personally, and I took it personally because of this. And you start understanding the roots behind your shadow aspects.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the shadow is such a big part of it. I mean, also like what I like to use as a metaphor for this is like the idea of the centipede. It's very cool because it's like we're touching on so many different topics and so many different things. It's almost like the centipede with multiple legs, like many legs, that goes into different parts of your being in general, right? Like your whole body and your mind. And I think the big part of it also is like the idea with this inner voice in your head that's almost like your ego, which is your conscious self, like yourself. Your ego has to be strong enough to be able to combat this, essentially, right? Like the inner voice in your head is overpowering you. So there's a really good fairy tale that I found like during my research. I stumbled upon it's the Grimm's tale. It's like fairy tale, and it's like it's about a princess who, well, I'll just summarize it really shortly, but it's a princess that's going to be wed to meet another king, like a neighboring king, and well, she's sent there by herself with the maid, and the maid is supposed to serve the princess, right? And then the first thing that the princess says, go fetch me some water, and then the maid says, no, you can go do it yourself, go fetch your own water. Right? And so you have this pattern now. During their trip, this maid is slowly taking over the princess, and by the time they get to the king, they actually switch places in the story. So the maid is presents herself as the princess, and the princess is the maid. So it's a really good example of this, because the maid in this case is the inner voice in your head. It's just personified, basically. It's personified as, well, in this case it's a maid, but it could be really anything that in your life it could be different things with different people.
Could it be that it's a maid because literally this voice is supposed to serve you as a person?
Use the mic, Adriano, please.
Sorry. No, what I mean is, do you think it was personified as a maid because the whole purpose of the mind, that is a tool for us, is to make the mind serve us and not the other way around? When you become like a slave of you embody the slaveness of your own thoughts, that's when this is you realize that every action that you make is not even something that you want to or is beneficial for you. So it steps a little bit more of a self-saboteur, because it becomes literally it's not only actions to self-sabotage you, it's literally to destroy you. You know what I mean? I don't know, just thinking about the story that you heard made me think about this. So maybe that's why it was personified as a maid.
Yeah, no, I mean the for sure. I mean these inner images in Jungian psychology, a lot of the that's what I really like about it is a lot of the things are put into image, personified. Yeah. That's why you can also go into archetypal imagery where this voice can be a witch, like a witch archetype, and oftentimes, I mean, when let's say you would dream, in your dream about this witch that's tormenting you or something. Yeah. Right, it's the same metaphor manifesting itself. And the idea is obviously to empower yourself to the point where you can actually fight this inner voice, right? And obviously in the tale it doesn't end there. So obviously eventually the whole thing is this princess trying to overpower the maid, and it has to end, in a victorious way.
Take back what it was hers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and also the inner voice is one thing is that I know about, obviously there are so many different even personalities inside of us, right? It could be, but they also have they have to serve us in a way, right? They have to we have to give the direction. A good metaphor also is a king that's on the throne, and a king who doesn't have and the root of it is the not having defined your values or not having set goals for yourself, right? Who am I? What am I trying to do? If you don't have these things, you're very, very likely to be overpowered by these voices, because if you're unsure of what you want to do, or you're unsure of why you're doing a certain thing, then of course these voices, it's imagine if a king that's a weak king, right, in the courtroom, you have all these people who are supposed to advise the king, but then their voices start being overpowering the king and start taking over. And if you replace them with lust or greed or pride, all these energies, they start, instead of serving you, they start overpowering you, controlling you basically. So this is also a huge part of it. Yeah,
that's a good example about the king, because well, we often talk about self-mastery, even though it's super hard to reach, but it's exactly the same thing. Self-mastery is being able to be aware of all your emotions, disruptive and constructive emotions, and be actually able to use them for your own benefit. The idea is not to, again, throw them to the void, your negative emotions. It's to be aware that they're there, and sometimes they happen. And if they happen to be, then you just need to be able to control yourself and act on them in a good way. That's how you reach self-mastery.
He who masters himself masters the world. There's
Good
a
stuff.
saying. Yeah.
Bars. Facts, Adriano, facts. Yeah.
No,
good
but
line.
I just wanted to add a little bit on that because it is absolutely true. As you said before, when we were talking about like positive and negative, these are like very difficult things to define, and definitely talking about that in another podcast.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like emotions are emotions. There's no negative emotion. There's no positive emotion. It depends how you use them and act upon them. So once you understand that this, let's just categorize it as a negative emotion, you can use it in a good way because it can help you build something amazing. It can help you get over something that has been an impediment all your life. So we don't have to go like, white and black all the time, especially when it comes to our subconscious, when it comes to our behavior, when it comes to our way of seeing, visualizing the way the path is supposed to be like built up in our feet. It's like when you said self-mastery is the same way. And I think in the part of the shadow is a beautiful thing that Carl Jung is actually saying, is that we all have this. We all count with these little big things, however you want to see it, but they don't have to be there all the time. And you don't have to just like, oppress them in a certain way. Or it's because there's this part of my personality which I don't like, but it's your personality.
Yeah.
Whether you like it or not.
Repressing them won't solve the problem. And at some point, they will just revolt again to your conscious mind. And if you have this internal battle of your conscious mind and your shadow aspects, if you're not reaching this level of integrating your shadow, that's going to be a problem. And I think you want to mention something about integrating the shadow, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was just like, that was, Adriano, thanks. That was like a really good way to also bring this to the shadow thing. I like the way you did that. And it's like, parts of yourself that you don't want to accept, right? Like it's like this. I think part of shadow integration is a pretty big topic that we can also talk more deeply about this on a whole nother episode. But like a big part of it in this case is acceptance, because the let's say you it's like the inner voice that's tormenting you about certain things, right? Like for example, it could be, I mean, the craziest and biggest example is soldiers who go through like war, right? Like they see their PTSD, right? They're having their friends die in front of them. I mean, it's and then you have almost these like ghosts, right, in your head of people. It's like voices, right? And then at that point, it's almost like you have to. There's a moment of acceptance, right? You have to accept that this is what happened, right? Like you went through this. This is, and it could be anything that, or it could be just on the average person's life, like this voice is criticizing you. Why did you do that? Like something 10 years ago, right? You did like, why did you do it this way? Why did you? It's like almost like it comes rushing into you, right? You're sleeping, right? And it just comes rushing. And at that point, you have to, like, the good thing is like keep saying like, I did it. Yes, I did it. I did it. Yes. And like, don't even like, it's not about like, I think it's not even about judging it one way or another, like moral judgment. It's more like, yes, accept it, I did it, that's part of me. And that's like part of the shadow integration as well. And for a lot of people also, shadow integration can be like done through exploring. Like people say, one interesting thing was that, because I was interested in shadow integration for a while, and when I came across it, it was like such an interesting thing, and it was like 2-3 years ago. And I ended up asking some YouTuber person, is like he would read Carl Jung's like books and analyze them. He's a very old man actually, and one of the things he told me was interesting. He said, well, a good thing is to read Carl Jung to integrate your shadow. Like reading Carl Jung by itself already helps you to integrate your shadow. It's interesting because it's almost like again, this is such a big thing where like doing the simple act of becoming aware, right? Like just become aware of these dynamics or these functions or for example reading the laws of power, right? Like the it's such a you start actually like integrating your shadow by doing that, right? Just by reading it, because your subconscious already becomes aware of these things, and just being aware is such a huge part of integrating your shadow, right? Or let's say stopping your self-sabotaging behaviors. So yeah, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but
no, I just want to mention that we had to bring this idea of the shadow because it needs a special episode to just talk about the shadow. I think it's a really not complicated topic, but it's
Very deep.
It's very deep, exactly. So it needs a lot of time to discuss in it, but it's related to the today's podcast, which is self-sabotage. And actually, if you don't have anything else to mention, I want to discuss a story about Anton Chekhov.
Yeah.
He was a Russian writer, and he has an interesting story that we can have a good interpretation or understanding of how self-sabotage works, and also how you can change it by changing the way you see things. And what I mean by things, I mean life, how you see people, how you see yourself, and how you can change your attitude with no change of your circumstances, because we keep blaming our circumstances. We keep saying that, well, we don't have money to do this, or I don't have the energy to do this, or again, I'm a Gemini, I can't help it. So you just keep bringing excuses to the table. But the good thing about this story is, so he, Anton, as a kid, he was beaten up by his father a lot for no reason. And after every experience of like getting beat up for no reason, his father would ask him to kiss his hand. And he would explain it as it's something needed. Like that's how you learn. Like you should get this kind of punishment. And his father also used to send him to his grocery shop. His father used to drink a lot, so he would go like to bars and stuff. But he would leave his kid in really like bad environments with like criminals and stuff like this in this grocery shop late at night when it's super cold, that even he cannot do his homeworks because the ink of his pen would just freeze. Like it was, they used to live in, I hope I'm not misspelling it, but it's Taganrog, something like that.
Oh yeah, that's very good actually.
Taganrog. Okay.
Good,
yeah.
good.
So they used to live in this place, right? And
it's a place in Russia. If you don't
yeah,
know.
if
anyone
it's
doesn't
in
know.
By the way.
yeah, by the way. And so he used to question himself a lot if he deserves this beating every day. The good thing, but like it was the same treatment for all his brothers. So at least he didn't go through this, oh, maybe it's me. Like he saw everyone going through the same.
Which made it a little bit fair, right?
Yeah. Which is a good thing again.
At least
yeah.
it's fair.
Yeah, but he would question this like every day. And he would blame his father, of course, of everything that is happening in his life. His mother used to try to protect him, but she didn't have this much power, obviously. But then something interesting happens. So because of his father's mismanagement of the grocery shop, he had a lot of debt and he couldn't deal with it. Some of Anton's brothers had to go to Moscow to study there. So without any notice to Anton's mother, the father just left to live with their kids. And then his mother had to manage everything with the debt and stuff like this. So she was actually counting on someone who was trying to help them. But then no, he was just manipulating her to get all their, like the house and everything they had. So also she couldn't afford living there, so she had to go to also live with them in Moscow. And Anton stayed there in, like, he was living in a corner of a room Like he had a really bad condition to live in. But the good thing that happened to him is that he got detached. He's not living in this environment anymore. Obviously, it didn't happen from the beginning that he started realizing that he's getting detached. So at least he's going to have some time to think about everything that happened in his life. He went through depressive cycles in the beginning by him living in like by himself. And what I mean by cycles, that's probably few days, because also the important thing for him was to survive. And when you're in this survival mode, you cannot provide for yourself and you have to hustle hard. You cannot think about the luxurious things of like my feelings or like my emotions. You just need to feed yourself basically. So he started working super hard. He used to teach, I believe, and he lived in these difficult conditions. But when he started working hard also, and that's worth mentioning because we said that many things are ingrained in us, he used to, his father used to tell him that he's lazy the whole time. And when he started working hard, even though he's working hard, he started doubting himself, like maybe I'm lazy and I should work more. So it was like a belief that it's ingrained in him. So then something happened, like he started reading a lot of stories, and he had this, well, Maslow would call it the peak experience, but in which you just have this realization. We cannot say out of nowhere, but it happens one day. Like one day you just wake up and you feel like doing something. Well, he had this realization that his father is a character in a story, and he cannot keep blaming him his whole life, and he needs to set himself free. So he also did some research about the whole story of the Chekhovs, and he discovers that they were, well, not the typical idea of slave, but they were slaves in the Russian community. They have like different types of slavery basically, and this type is like you need to work for the rest of your life, which sounds like modern slavery basically. Yeah, but you have no freedom to at least take this decision of, okay, I want to be a freelancer now, like I want to do this. Like you have to keep working, doing the same thing, and that's it. So that's a form of slavery. And his father also used to receive the same beating. So he started thinking about this whole thing. He got detached, and then he started feeling empathy towards his father. Like he's a character, Anton is a character. They both received some kind of, well, bad treatments. But then when he got detached and he felt this empathy, he also started worrying about his brothers, because they're not thinking about this now, especially that they're living with their father again. So it's probably they're going through the same cycle of being resentful to their fathers and being resentful to themselves and having a low self-esteem. So he moved to Moscow. He started setting a good example for his brothers. So he started also providing for them. He started giving them books and question their philosophical beliefs. And he had a big issue with Alexander, and that was his brother, but he used to really hate his father. And he also started developing the same traits of his father, like drinking alcohol so much, being resentful, and also disrespecting everyone in the house, including the mother, who was just trying to defend him the whole time. But the good thing about this story actually is because Anton, he did have the same circumstances that he was living in, but then the way he started thinking about his father as a character of the story, or the way he started looking at life, the way he started looking at his attitude, he started realizing that he was sabotaging himself from doing a lot of things just because of this simple idea. Because when he realized that, then he felt like joining the medical school. He started writing more stories. He started distributing his work. He went and he lived with his brothers, but he was able to find his father a new job. He was able to provide for his brothers and set a good example for them. And also, he would never allow disrespect happening in the house. So yeah, the Anton's story is a paradigm of what we face in life. Like we carry many traumas from childhood and many bad traits. But this is just an example to say that you can have the same circumstances that you're blaming the whole time, but the way you change your lens of seeing life or seeing people or seeing yourself and changing your attitude can help you overcome your inner self-sabotage. I don't know if you want to comment on this story.
Well, I have a few things I was noting down when I was speaking, because I
Okay.
was thinking like, well, that's a really nice story. And also the, well, nice story. Good story for the and yeah, exactly. I mean, it's and also like the ending, I guess, like the, you know, the morale of it. It's very, the attitude change. I think that's a very it's a very it gets really to the core of the kind of solution, I think, of this, like beyond analyzing it, because I think I'm going to dissect it a little bit, but at the end of the day, this is, yes, it's the attitude change. That's how you get out of it. And I think, well, for the first thing is, like you said, the way his father was treating him, right? Like if we look at this from the perspective of like psychoanalytic perspective, it's almost like there's this family generational kind of pattern of behavior, right? Like, so that his father was treated that way, he's treating this son that way, and obviously in this case, what he's setting his son up for, I mean, this is like almost like in a way perfect serfdom. I mean, it's like kiss my hand, get a beating, don't do, like, just, you know, be an obedient, you know, slave, basically, right? Like, and yeah, the putting this in a narrative now, like as a story, seeing your father as a character, yourself as a character. Yeah. This is a very interesting move. And in a way, it's like a fortunate thing, I guess, that kind of happened to him, where it's like a very interesting way to break out of that, because as you said, he had an empathy for him then. Like, he was able to manifest empathy towards his father, which is actually how you... thinking about yourself and this negative voice in your head, which in this case would be the father, right? The way you would fight that is to actually transform it, right? And how you transform it, not by pushing it away or negating it, but actually by embracing. And like, there's also this thing where like you could like have a conversation with it, where like in well, some Jungian therapists, they have this method where like you sit down, so you have two chairs, right? You sit in a room, you sit on one chair, and you talk from your perspective, and you say all your grievances, everything that you're feeling towards this voice in your head, right? Whoever it may be. But you have to put it in an image. So in this case, it's a father, right? So in a way, you're already like the same thing with the character. You're putting yourself and the father as a character. So now you're telling everything that you're feeling to the father. Then you get up, you sit on the opposite chair, and you respond from the perspective of the father. So these because it's an internalized voice, actually. It's not your father, right? Like it's a voice, and your unconscious, it knows it knows that thing is there, that this image, it's in your head, and in that case, all you're doing is just channeling it. So so now you're having a conversation with it, and then this kind of confrontation with it, where and a lot of the times the result of that is this feeling of empathy. Like you start feeling, because now you have a conversation with it, right? Like there has to be some reason why this voice is telling you the things that it's telling you, right? Like, and at that point you start already like having this kind of empathy towards it, and then this is like the moment of transformation that happens. And also in a lot of fairy tales, you know, a witch has a lot of treasure usually, or something, right? Like there's some, you know, a dragon has treasure, but a lot of the times all these negative characters that you're fighting with, they're always hiding something, you know, like that you want, right? So in that sense, this transformation of the father becomes this treasure, right? For the
that's super interesting. There is a quote by Abraham Lincoln. He said, "I don't like this guy. I must get to know him better." So that's the perfect example, I think. Sometimes you see some figures in your life, and it's not that they're bad or they're evil, but you just didn't have enough time to actually think about their motives behind doing stuff, or like their full story, because you just judge how you feel about certain things, but you don't put yourself like, I don't know, the Stoic approach would be like the overview, which is like looking at the whole context and see what's actually happening there.
And I just wanted to add a little bit about the story before. I think that it also embraces something that is called like the sins of the father, for example, that is like this generational behavior and patterns that are literally learned from the previous generation to the newer, and constantly like this. Especially when we said before that when you're a kid, you see your parents like, you know, this like trust, this like, I don't know, maybe quote unquote hero type of thing. And when he received the beatings and he was like, kiss the hand, this type of thing, it was like, okay, this is the norm. This happens to my brothers, this happens to me, this is the norm. This is the way life is. This is the way it's supposed to be. And when he detaches himself, instead of being like just repeating the pattern of just blaming the previous one and doing the exact same to the other one, like his brother Alexander, if I'm not mistaken, was like starting to do, he realizes that his father is also just another human that went through the same type of fucked up situation, and his way of reacting to this was just putting all of this in the shadow, the good things in the shadow, on just being governed by literally like the bad things. And without realizing that the father was literally just not only sabotaging himself because he was destroying his family, like the source of income, his job, his store, his partner, which was his wife. He was just making everybody hate him, which is like separating themselves from love, which at the end of the day is the important thing. Like if you want to like forgive yourself or like realize where this is coming from, you have to look at it in approach of love. So what he did with his father was like, okay, he's human, he has a lot of issues, there's something wrong, but like not everything is his fault, and I'm not gonna blame him from my side. I'm gonna just give what he deserves, love. I don't know, like that made them a sense of like growing as a person, you know, as an individual, as just like not only pointing fingers who to blame, to just be able to like overcome the situation. Which is why like it was a horrible story in a certain way, but it was a beautiful ending. Which makes it cool.
And before starting the podcast, we had this the same conversation about David Goggins. And well, if you read the story of this guy, he had a really bad childhood. Like
he's insane.
I can say that it's a bad childhood. But well, just to keep it brief, one of the ways also to set himself free is having a conversation with his father when he overcame all the issues that he had, and feeling this kind of empathy or trying to understand the other person is always a good step to solve problems. Because if you just keep, you know, like the easiest way to do stuff is just labeling people. Like it's super easy to say, I don't want to meet this person because he's toxic, or like this person is envious, or like this person is I don't know, he's not a good friend. Like when you put labels, it becomes just super easy to deal with things, but you're using the avoidant attitude, which is just like investing time on understanding the other person.
And you're self-sabotaging at the same time because you don't know what type of experience this person might actually bring you, or what type of knowledge you might actually learn from them. You're literally just like seeing the door and being like, I'm gonna keep it closed. And where is that gonna take you? Nowhere. Because you're not opening a new way. You're just like you know, like sitting in the corner.
This would lead us to actually talk about the most common types of attitudes that can lead you to self-sabotaging yourself. And I just want to mention that this is from the 8th chapter in The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. I would recommend everyone to read all his books. Like, this guy is amazing, and we might have him on the podcast one day, hopefully.
Fingers crossed.
So in Robert Greene's book, he mentioned the most common types of attitudes. He would define an expansive lens of seeing life, which is, we would say, the positive one, and the narrow one, which would make you adopt some certain attitudes that would help you self-sabotage yourself. So the example of Anton's, his father was hostile, and Anton also started feeling this kind of hostility. So the hostile attitude is normally like they would have different childhood patterns, but some of them are punished by their parents or their environment, and they see the world like full of hostility. So they started becoming hostile themselves because they're gonna receive the same thing. So that's a way of dealing with your environment. And I would say Robert Greene said actually one of the ways to overcome this hostile attitude is just trying to switch your lens, and instead of assuming stuff, for example, okay, I have this belief that everyone is hostile towards me. But if you start just ingraining some kind of positivity, like, okay, I'm meeting this person, he's actually kind, he's smart, like you start just switching a bit your lens, you will start seeing the good things about the other person. Because if you're just keeping this negative lens, that's all you're gonna see.
Yeah.
Which is it shapes your attitude, and it shapes the way you see life, basically. The anxious attitude, and I would say I connect a bit with this anxious attitude, just because they have also this perfectionist excuses of not doing stuff, which is also what was sabotaging me from starting the podcast, basically. But this kind of attitude, they like people with the same attitude, they anticipate all kinds of obstacles and difficulties, and they expect criticism and betrayal, and they would disguise this attitude with like perfectionism, or like I want to do things the best way, basically. Yeah. But it's just like thinking about, yeah, this project might fail, or like I'm not good enough to do this, or like I don't have enough knowledge to start working on this project, for example, stuff like this. But actually, I think my personal cure to this is just asking this question: what's the worst that can happen? Which is something I learned from a rapper called Russ. His mother used to ask him the same question, and when I heard it, I was like, true. Whenever I want to start something now, I'm just like, okay, what's the worst that can happen? And about the podcast, the worst that can happen is me just getting knowledge. Like, let's say this is not getting distributed. We don't have audience. We're still having the same conversations that we normally have in cafes. We're just talking about the same topics. The plus that we have is putting actually effort in doing this and doing more research, which is good for us. So it's not even like a bad scenario, right?
Yeah, of course.
And I keep questioning why I was sabotaging myself the whole time, but yeah. There is the avoidant attitude. That's really interesting, because they see life with this lens of insecurities, and they have a lot of doubts about their competence, and it translates to self-opinion. We as human beings, we normally have a lot of we have a self-opinion about ourselves. We would like to believe that we're super smart, we're super good, we're super ethical, we don't do any bad things. And if this belief is kind of challenged, we would like to just avoid doing anything that would threaten our beliefs, right? So with the avoidant attitude, they feel threatened if this self-opinion is challenged. And we brought this example of like, okay, let's say I'm so good at I don't know, like any kind of example. I'm so good at sales, right? And there is a sales challenge, like you have to sell a pen in front of like a bunch of people.
Yeah.
I would avoid going there just not to challenge my self-opinion as a really good salesperson.
Yeah.
Which is a real form of self-sabotage. Like I've seen this cases like many times of just like, okay, I would avoid doing this just because I would like to keep believing that I'm so good that I don't want to put myself in a situation of like sitting with Aslan and Adriano, and maybe they will say something smarter than me, and they would outshine me. So I would rather just not do
Which
the
that
podcast
happens
with these
very
guys.
often. By
Exactly.
The way.
That's why I just mentioned it. But you get it. Like
Yeah.
you would feel outshined if your self opinion is challenged, right? So we have two more attitudes. He also mentioned something about the depressive attitude. Its origins is normally from childhood, and they experience like not being loved or respected by their parents, and they also anticipate like loss and abandonment. They anticipate all these bad things. And the interesting thing is that they feed their depression. Like afterwards it becomes part of them, and it's something that they need to satisfy. They need to feed their depression. So I see this also as vulnerable narcissism, which something we're gonna discuss also in one of the next episodes. But they also use people as instruments just to feed their needs of attention and love. But they never get satisfied. Like they would just bring you into this dramatic world. And honestly, like Robert Greene is so explicit about this. He's just like, avoid these people.
Yeah,
like,
just, like,
don't try
run away.
don't try to cure them, because he knows that these people are attractive in the sense of we as humans will thrive collectively, and we would like to help people so we can feel good about ourselves.
Yeah.
It's always a selfish motive.
Yeah.
So when you see someone who's depressed, you're like, okay, I'm gonna be this guy who's gonna save this person, you know? But then you become helpless, first of all. So it affects your confidence and your self-esteem. But also you get dragged into this depressive world, which is, well, we're dealing with a lot of things. We don't want to keep dealing with some toxic environments like these. So that's why he says clearly, like, just try to avoid these people. The last attitude is, I feel that I'm pronouncing attitude in a French way.
No.
Attitude.
Well,
Attitude.
I would like to say to the audience, first of all, none of us are from an English-speaking country, so
Yeah.
be patient sometimes.
Okay, I'm not going to be sabotaging myself about
Our accents.
mispronouncing any word. I'm just going to keep going.
The French.
Yeah. Well, for this specific attitude, they also didn't have, well, that's a real issue, like parental love.
That's
It's the root of many bad traits, let's say. But people with resentful attitude, they also look for attention, they look for recognition, and also they're kind of like, you would be really concerned being with these people, because they also develop some psychological strategies to disguise their resentment. So they can smile in your face, they can be super kind to you, but they're super resentful. Like they would be scanning your nonverbal cues the whole time. They would be questioning if you're doing, like, anything would threaten their insecurities. They would be thinking about you the whole time, like just scanning you, just seeing everything that you might say as a kind of insult, for example. Do you have any comment?
Yeah.
I saw you taking notes.
Yeah, for sure. Now I was also just writing all of them down. It's very interesting. I mean, I think big part of this also, I mean, the different, all of these attitudes is also that we're so multidimensional as people. It's almost like, well, sometimes, you know, talking about the expansive and the narrow
Yeah.
view, like I think the narrow view, I mean, it's like, I think it's kind of default natural way to go about things, like this narrow view where you just focus on one thing, like one dimension, because like people are so like multidimensional. We have all of these different attitudes and personalities inside of us in a way where all of them have their own needs and their own like interests in a way, right? Like, for example, the one with the depressive attitude, where you're kind of, yeah, it kind of, well, becomes in a way where you start trapping yourself and like feeding this negativity into your own life as a person with the depressive attitude, where like
I'm actually worried if the camera is still recording. Can you check, since you were sending up? Is it?
It's black here.
Okay.
that means it's not recording.
Yeah, maybe. But let's keep going because we have the audio recorded, so it's
Okay,
fine.
well, we can fix it. I mean, it's
No,
fine.
we can just keep going.
Yeah, the depressive attitude, it's like when you, like, one good example is this, when people are looking for ways to confirm their pre-existing idea, or their, like, let's say you don't like the way you look and you've been criticized about it, so then it almost becomes this thing where you're unconsciously going to look for it elsewhere in the world. So you're going to actually, in a way, your unconscious is going to trap you, so, and self-sabotage you again. So it's going to put you in situations where you are most likely to be criticized. This is also like very interesting because it's like you're going to ask certain questions that are going to make you upset about yourself. And then, like, this question, the classic thing where you ask, the wife asks the husband, do I look fat in this dress? it's and it's, everyone's like, this thing is like, it's like a trap question. Like, you're fucked no matter what you say. Like,
no other the answer.
yeah. And that's kind of also, it could be an example of where, you know, the person who's asking that question is looking unconsciously for something that's gonna hurt them, because that's what they're used to. And then they feed that, and then it's like a loop then at that point.
Yeah.
And I thought that was like very interesting relation with the depressive, and then you get depressed about it. I mean, it's like and yeah, obviously, like, also, yeah, as you said, like, helping people with this issue is also extremely difficult. I mean, it obviously can manifest in many different ways, but yeah, kind of, no matter what you do, it's almost like they already expect it. They set everything up where they're already like gonna self-sabotage themselves and drag you down with them as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to say something. I think that it's really important. If someone is really like connecting with any of these traits, or they feel that they see themselves in these kind of attitudes, also not to have this guilt complex of like, okay, we're bad people, or like we're super toxic.
Good thing to mention.
Yeah. The main idea behind this is to understand the roots, and we all, as kids, we're not rational, so we just adopt some psychological strategies and some defensive mechanisms that gonna help us go through life with no suffering, because that's like, you just want to survive as a child. You just mirror people and you just find something that it's gonna work for you. Like, I know many people that like use just they would be always like funny and smiley, but they're hiding a lot of suffering behind them because they feel that it's the only coping mechanism they can use, which is, again, not a bad thing, but also it's good to be aware that your inner child cannot be judged by the mechanisms you developed during life. But also, as an adult or someone who want to improve themselves, it's also good to understand that you have a choice now, since you're aware of this, and you can basically overcome self-sabotage or overcome these traits through, again, changing the lens by which you see life and changing your attitude, and stop blaming circumstances.
Yeah. And like, huge part of this also is like, I think that's good that you mentioned that, because I was also like, I mean, we touched upon this a little bit, the empathy part, but I think like also, you know, we talked about empathy like towards this negative voice, but it could also be, you know, like, the main thing is empathy towards yourself as well, because like this part of about the shadow as well, let's say, where, you know, you have blaming yourself for these things that you've done, right, or things that happen to you. You're like overly critical of yourself. I think the like really core way of approaching this is also empathy towards yourself. And I think it's good to mention that as well, because obviously, like, by, if you think about it, like, okay, this is wrong with me, this is wrong with me. Yeah, so many things it can get you down. So, like, I think the important thing to know is that, like, you have to approach yourself with empathy in this case, because you're only human. And this is also, I mean, I think everyone suffers from these issues. I mean, it's like such a common thing, one way or another. If you are a human being who is growing up in a culture, whatever it may be, you're gonna have these issues one way or another. And a big part of it is also, it's a part of your journey of individuation or reaching your fullest potential, whatever it may be. I mean, if you're not, like, if you're already at your peak, there's no striving towards anything. There's no journey, right? At that point, life is kind of meaningless, right? I mean, it's like, this is a good way to approach it, with empathy, and this is your journey. And in Jungian psychology also, we can, I mean, go much deeper into this in other episodes, but shadow integration is actually in Jungian psychology, it's the first step towards individuation. That's the easiest, because it's like the thing that's kind of on the surface. Like, you don't have to dig that deep to understand that, okay, yeah, like, there are things about me that I repress, or negative things that I don't like to think about that I do. But, like, the way to do it is to first become aware of them, and then to accept them. And to do that, you need to have empathy towards yourself. That's the kind of the key for that. And shadow integration is the first step towards this. But, and different people, intellectuals or psychologists or people who write about these things, they have different namings, right, for these things. Like, you're reaching your true potential, or your, like, your peak. Like in Jungian, it's like the individuation,
the Ubermensch.
Yeah. And individuation is basically like integrating all these parts of yourself that are unknown. And the second one after the shadow is I'm going kind of off topic, but it's
it's fine. You have 1 minute for
going
this.
with this, maybe somewhere interesting. The feminine and masculine aspects of yourself, because for men it's something like a masculine aspect, a feminine part of you that's probably repressed, probably something that you need to integrate in. And after the shadow, that's something that you work on. I mean, in normal life, this kind of happens naturally, where you encounter situations which require you to integrate this. Otherwise, it's like a blockage, and you can't move on. Like, you can't spiritually develop as a person. And yet, for women, it's the masculine aspects, the anima. And obviously, men and women have these, or both of these, to a certain degree. But because of the biological and cultural environment that we grew up in, it's set up in a certain way where men usually are repressed in the feminine aspect of themselves, and women are in the masculine aspect. So yeah, I think that's like a really good way to also maybe talk about some of the ways we can tackle, some of the practical ways we can tackle the self-sabotage behaviors that we're doing, and how we can fight them.
Yeah, for sure. So actually, the main two questions for this will be like how to stop sabotaging yourself, and the principle, the main one will be, why do we sabotage ourselves? For example, we made this research with Dr. Debbie Silber. She is the CEO and founder of the PBT Institute, which is the Post-Betrayal Transformation. She states the following when it comes to like self-sabotage, that it is like a behavior that is repeated. So it becomes a habit. It's a habit that you constantly do it to yourself. And why do we do it to ourselves? Because change is scary. Changing our habits is scary. Changing our personalities is scary. Changing our way of how our modus operandi, the way we tackle the situations, is very scary. Like the comfortable and the familiar, even if the comfortable and familiar is shit, it is nicer than change. Like in a subconscious way, like people are very like entangled to their habits, to their known, to whatever they already know.
Again, we're always resistant, even though we know that it's not leading us to anywhere good, but we're resistant because it's just ingrained in us. So yeah, this fear of change, it's a good example of self-sabotaging.
Yeah, and that's what she says. Like, it's so much easier to sabotage ourselves, like to keep ourselves numb, as we were saying before, like with alcohol, drugs. Even another type of aspect will be like overwork, like a workload that is like unstoppable. The only thing you can do is just work, 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 work. So you really don't have no time for yourself to be a better person, to do the things that you like, because you're just only focusing on work. That's a way of self-sabotaging yourself at the same time.
Yeah.
Because thinking is hard, right? The story that you said, like that you told before, it was until he detached himself that actually started to think about the situation that he was in. In the meantime, he was just accepting it, because thinking is hard. Change is even harder. So like doing something that it will be like changing everything from your life is very like, it's a risk taking for the individual. So she, for example, states, and literally I will quote this from her, that there is that moment that where the pain that you feel where you are from is greater than the fear of the unknown. That's when you actually do the jump. When you realize, like, when you have this light bulb, it's like, okay, I cannot stand this anymore. Like, I need to do something about it. And just to say something about this, there's always, like, for example, this situation where it isn't that good, but it isn't that bad either. This is like the worst possible outcome for any human being, because it's not that good to actually do something about it, but it's not that bad to actually try to change it. So like, you're just stuck there. This is very common in a relationship.
It becomes a comfort zone.
Yeah.
It becomes your comfort.
Yeah. And this is horrible, because then you're just stuck there and you don't realize it, and you're just like repeating the same patterns in your head, in your life, in your daily habits, and nothing will change. But at the same time, you're miserable. So until that actually like makes that click in your mind, and then you have these ideas of like getting out of your comfort zone, that's when life begins. And she talks about like being fueled by your own ideas. And she states that there's like 5 stages for actually like learning how to stop sabotaging yourself. I'm gonna read them literally. This one is like stage 1, which is ignoring your gut instinct that something is wrong, because deep inside that is wrong, but you're just put it on the side. And focusing only on the physical and mental. So it's like literally work, just surviving this day, like what I'm gonna do, TV. This is all like just like distractions, and you're not putting like what is more important, the emotional and the spiritual. The emotional in like, why am I feeling this way? And the spiritual in a way is like, what I'm doing is actually fueling my spirit. Is actually like, like giving me the
self-fulfillment.
Exactly. This is what I was put in this life to do. I mean, like, it is a very difficult question to ask, right? Because but at least that it isn't. You may not have the yes, but at least the no as an answer, right? Because this is not what you were put in this earth to do. So you have to go there and actually like look for it. So the stage 2 is that you're blindsided. You're blindsided. You like a horse, that they put these things on the sides, and you're only like seeing straight. You don't see like the entire panorama of everything that is like surrounding yourself with, or the environment that you are in. Then the stage 3 will be the practical stage. Basically, you break them off and you put yourself into the practice mode. It's like, what do I have to do to overcome this? And you're gonna have some fails. And for example, it's like many like drug addicts or alcoholics say, like relapses. This is that stage when you're like actually fighting, grasping like the wall, and like going up, and then maybe you fall, but you keep like practicing until you actually reach the stage 4, which is like adjusting to your new normal. When you know that, okay, this is it. This is what I want to do. This is how I want it. How am I gonna like keep it? Like how am I gonna keep myself in here? Now you have to adjust certain things. Like for example, I don't know, changing booze for coffee. Like changing little habits, like waking up early, like actually doing exercise, like reading more books, like moving your inspiration, like cutting your toxic like relationships, whatever that may be.
Yeah, I just want to mention something that can be helpful in that process is actually defining a minimum success rate. So if you want to switch your habits or you want to build like new habits, think about the minimum success rate, and also try not to restrict it with time, but with actions. So instead of saying like, okay, I want to start with reading like 1 hour daily, think about like, okay, I want to do 5 pages a day.
Yeah.
Like try to assign yourself to do some small tasks. And again, like this is aligned with the Atomic Habits. It's actually a good book, and if I can summarize it, I would say just try to become 1% better every day.
Yeah.
And that's the goal. So instead of overwhelming yourself with this the person you want to become, just maybe start with some small tasks that you can do on a daily basis, and eventually they're going to help you like reach this habit goal that you have. Instead of reading every day five pages, because you're going to get super used to it, you're going to enjoy reading afterwards, so you're not going to feel it until you get in this flow state and read actually for 3 hours without feeling that it's overwhelming, or like it's something I need to do, and if I don't do it, then I'm guilty and I beat myself up because I'm not doing it.
Yeah. Actually, thank you for like bringing that up, because like in that book, like the stack, like habit stacking, like the same thing that you're talking, because like before we're creatures of habit.
Yeah.
You know, like, and even unconscious, we're creatures of habit.
Yeah.
So once you realize this and you're like, okay, this is my habit, how can I change it? Then he calls something about like stack habit. For example, if you like drinking coffee in the morning, well, why don't you drink your coffee and you read those 5 pages of the book? Because you're gonna like put together this amazing good thing.
That's classical conditioning.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's just like following up the topic of maybe giving you some hints or notes, like to where actually you can start. I hope it's helpful, because after like going back into the stages, because stage 5 is the rebirth. And when she means about the rebirth, that's
the rebirth.
Yeah, like a phoenix, right?
Monster reborn.
Yeah, exactly. That's when you actually have changed, because you have actually like swapped the old and put the new, and you just have to keep feeding it, because of course it's not like I have done it, that's it. No, life is not that easy, guys. You have to work every day on everything that you want to do, and it's still like working in succeeding yourself. Don't forget that even all habits have a tendency to coming back. So you just have to like keep working on them. And when it comes to like sabotaging yourself, like after everything we just talked and a lot of more information that we didn't even like grasp or had the opportunity to grasp, don't forget that at the end of the day, it's still a behavior, still something enrooted in yourself. It's like deep inside of yourself. Like you have to realize this before you want to change it. And that's like in everything in life. You can just expect like changes to come from nowhere without actually like sweating, crying, working from it. You know what I mean? Like if you want it, go and get it. But of course, it's not as easy as said as it is done. But there is a way. There's not only dark, like there's light at the end of the path. You know what I mean? And that's why, like, I think we wanted to talk about these like 5 stages. I mean, I'm pretty sure, we are definitely sure there's many other ways and many other things that you can like research on how to stop sabotaging yourself. Guys, we live in a century where knowledge and research is very easy and accessible. Like, just come back and listen to our podcast, for example. But like, I think it's very important that everyone does their own thing at the same time, you know?
Yeah, I think these are like good stages to put it in like a general way for everyone dealing with self-sabotage. But again, everyone who's dealing with self-sabotage, they need to try to understand also their attitudes, like the previous ones we just explained. Like, are they resentful to the world and that's why they're self-sabotaging themselves? Are they using perfectionism as an excuse, which I used to do like multiple times? And it's super common. That it's also interesting that for one idea, one project like the podcast, the 3 of us, we self-sabotaged ourselves in a way. Yeah. So and that's only one thing. So imagine all the things that we, on a daily basis, we self-sabotage ourselves from doing. Like, I don't know, not talking to a person, or like not going to the gym because we can make excuses of, okay, I need to spend time doing that, but actually you don't do anything beneficial afterwards. Or yeah. Also, I think I want to mention something about setting small goals. So I'm gonna quote Nietzsche. He says, "They fear their higher self because when it speaks demandingly, and whenever you think about the best version of yourself, or where you want to see yourself in, I don't know, like 10 years or 20 years, you think about this, like you start visualizing a perfect person with no flaws, with a lot of money, with a lot of knowledge, like all of these good aspects of life that you want to reach. And then you think about the process of going through all of that to reach this level, and then you're just overwhelmed. You're like, damn, it's super difficult, and you start self-sabotaging yourself again. So think about a short time frame, and think about maybe small projects that you can do, or small tasks. Like, instead of, again, that's related to the minimum success rate, but instead of saying, okay, I want to, I don't know, give me examples, guys, I'm struggling.
Like a big, something big or something small?
No, like, instead of saying that I want to reach something really big, I would think about reaching something that is really small.
Let's say, for example, if you're a bodybuilder and you want to have an Arnold Schwarzenegger's body, don't even think you're gonna have it in the next 4 months, guys.
Yeah.
But you know what you can do is like start going to the gym every fucking day.
Yeah, lift, guys, lift.
Exactly. In the first 4 months, that's a good process. That's a good way of actually like getting closer to where you want to be. Exactly. Because you cannot jump from like, okay, I'm starting here. This is my end goal. How can I make this shorter? It doesn't work like that. But like start with little, like, like stone by stone, it builds a wall. So,
Yeah. I just remembered something from an interview of Eminem, actually. So I listen to rap a lot, and I might use a lot of rap references. But this idea of also getting influenced by other people without them knowing that they're influencing us in a bad way, it's also super interesting because, well, Eminem talked about his self-sabotage, like he was self-sabotaging himself when he heard like some really good rappers, like, I don't know, I think he was referring to LL Cool J or like these old rappers. But he said like he used to think like, fuck, I cannot write something like this, or like I cannot rhyme the same way. Like we all know now like Eminem's skills, but imagine if he just kept self-sabotaging himself the whole time and like, yeah, I cannot reach this level of like, I cannot be an MC like this, I cannot flow like this. But then he released Rap God, in which he proved that he has enough skills to like beat anyone, and
in the industry,
like lyrically wise, and whoever gets in a diss with him, they basically disappear. Sorry, MGK, but this is the truth. This is the truth, right? So yeah, I think I also had experiences like these, and I think many people suffered from this bad influence when they want to especially like master a specific thing. Like, I want to be a really good designer, and then because you want to study these masters, you want to study these designers, you look at their work and you're like, there is no way I can be that creative, there is no way I can do this. And then you just start sabotaging yourself. And maybe you can give good examples as a designer, but that was the example I had in mind.
I mean, I think like for me, one thing that kind of helps me is the realization that, well, you're you. I mean, I'm not
good stuff.
I'm not those. I'm like, I have my own path, and I think that's something that if you are looking up to a specific person, or like it could be also an image that's personified, but if you're looking at that, you can use it as a source of motivation, and I think that's what I do. But don't let that overpower you, because don't let that scare you away. And this is also part of it, like having a stronger ego, having a stronger like just personality. Like you can actually, you're not letting things overpower you. So in that case, for me, what helps is like, yeah, understanding that I have my own path, and then you can set those goals that like, how do I actually like get there, right? Like, how do I advance, right? And then you can say, okay, like I want to achieve this thing, right? And then you can break it down further. I mean, you can really break it down however much you want, really. You can go as small, you know, we're talking about like atomic habits, right? Like tiny things that you can do. And I think once you break that down, doing those small things is slowly going to get you to where you want to be. And I think, yeah, but the key for me really is just like talking about this like scary, yeah, like bodybuilder, like I want to achieve this kind of body. I mean, it's like, yeah, you like I think key thing is really like having this understanding that you have your own path. Like you're not Arnold Schwarzenegger, but you're great in other ways, equally great. Like it's yeah, it's like this kind of black and white thing. It can happen to you where you're like, it's either that or nothing. You know, it's like there are so many, like it's so many gradations. And I think, yeah, like it's very much connected to this perfectionism thing where you're like, you know, you're not letting yourself to even go out and put yourself in a situation, a vulnerable situation or uncertain situation where you have the opportunity to grow. Right? Like unless you actually go out and do it, like go to the gym, you're not gonna know even your potential. You know what I mean? Like, so yeah, I think that's I think that's a really good way to end it. Noah, you want to add something more? Or?
Not really, Adriano.
Yeah.
No. I agree with you. I think it's a good way to end it. I would like to say something to the audience. I hope you enjoy it. Don't forget the name, the Human Library. We're gonna get with you with much content and much topics, and also eventually we're gonna find a way of incorporating your side on questions into our project. So be a little bit patient. Don't forget, this is episode number 1. Again, thank you, both of you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
And that's it.
That's a wrap.
Have a good one.
Good stuff.
Yay. Done.
Woo! Yeah. I'm sorry, I needed to stand up to pee. I couldn't take it anymore.
Don't worry, it's fine. I think that's fine.